Hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our now growing series dedicated to actually decent vegetarian recipes with a shot at my personal favorite Chinese tofu dish, which is a deep-fried and braised tofu stir-fry known as Shao Tofu. As is often the case with this series, I frequently find myself on a mission to display the many wonderful ways that tofu can be highlighted in Chinese cuisine without being bland, floppy, crumbly, or chewy, as is so very often the case with bad vegetarian recipes that are trying to treat tofu as a meat substitute, which it is not. A Shao Tofu, on the other hand, is one of the many tofu-centric Chinese stir-fries that iconically features a deep-fried firm or medium-firm piece of tofu that has been coated in a light egg and cornstarch batter, then stir-fried with veggies and slow-braised in a rich oyster sauce base. The slow braise to our fried tofu is going to cause its thin batter to soften up during the cook, yielding a more tender and toothsome rather than crispy piece of tofu. Most typically, you'll find this dish in a lot of Chinese restaurants serving classic comfort food dishes. Our version here today is in fact inspired by one found at a now extinct San Francisco spot from my childhood known as Dragon House. For our version today, I'll be using some baby bok choy, some thin sliced carrots, and shiitake mushrooms, but depending on the restaurant, you'll often find this dish served with a wide variety of veggies, including things like snow peas, gailan, baby bok choy, mustard greens, baby corn, bamboo, or as always, whatever happens to be in season. Okay, so let's get into it.
Whatever happened to predictability? The milkman, the paper boy, eating and cheating. Did I get delivered here? Somebody tell me, please.
Alright, so kicking things off here first, as with most of our Chinese stir-fries, I'm starting off with the aromatic veggies of our wok fry. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger, which we're setting aside to head into our wok for our stir-fry later on. Then moving on to our veggies, today we're going to be using some carrots, baby bok choy, and shiitake mushrooms because this is how I always remembered the dish being served at Dragon House, but once again use whatever you can find that's fresh. For our carrots, I'm peeling and slicing these up into fairly thin coin shapes, which should pair well with the other tender and more leafy veggies that are coming up. I also like to do these on a bias cut and trim off these smaller tip ends too, which will help get us a more even cook to the carrots during the braise. For our bok choy, today we're using baby bok choy, which is going to be about half the size of a full-grown bok choy, and will also be a much lighter shade of green as well. I generally prefer these to full-grown bok choy because they're a little bit less bitter and chewy. In either case though, I'm slicing these into quarters and then giving them a quick wash. Also, quick PSA, please wash your veggies, if not for the germs, then at the very least to get the literal dirt and bugs off of them. Finally, rounding this all out are my shiitake mushrooms, about 6 of them today. I'm rehydrating these in boiling water for about 10 minutes until tender, then saving this umami-filled mushroom water for our braise later on. I don't know why I don't see more people doing this, but this stuff is actual liquid gold, so don't go and dump this down the drain. Why are people doing that? I don't know. Moving on to our braising sauce next, we're keeping things fairly simple here with the majority of our ingredients intended to support the richness of our oyster sauce, which is the real star of the show today. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and a single tablespoon of sesame oil to start, followed by a tablespoon each of Shaoxing wine and black vinegar for some brightness, and a tablespoon of brown sugar for a bit of malted sweetness. Then finally, as promised, here's our 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce, which is going to bring some nice rich earthy umami and caramel color to our braise. Now, I know what you're thinking, up until this very moment we were making a vegan stir-fry, but fear not because vegan oyster sauce derived from shiitake mushroom is very readily available and is also a nearly indistinguishable substitute. So, cook onward, my vegan friends. Next up, moving on to my tofu, this is 1 pound or a single block of firm tofu that I very half-heartedly tried to press some liquid out of before realizing that today we're going to be using a wet batter anyway, and this isn't really going to do anything at all. In any case, a Shao Tofu is iconically sliced into large squares, so we're going with slices down the horizontal side and 1 down the vertical side like so. Moving on to our batter, this is the second and final animal byproduct which we're using today, which is 2 egg whites. Ignore this bit of egg yolk here, which you should not include. Whoops. It'll be okay. Our egg whites will give us some nice activation and lift during our fry, so for our vegan friends, you can substitute this with a 1/4 cup of water and a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda for a very similar effect created by the alkaline in the baking soda. Then rounding out our batter here is going to be 4 tablespoons or a 1/4 cup each of cornstarch and water, or soda water for some bonus bubbles if you've got some on hand. I'm whisking this up into a smooth batter and then briefly considering doing this one piece at a time before deciding that this is totally unnecessary and will also take forever. So instead, what you should do is add the batter to the tofu, not the other way around, or you'll make a huge mess like this. But anyway, we're giving this all a good coating. Then in a separate bowl, I'm dissolving 2 tablespoons of cornstarch in water for a cornstarch slurry, and we're heading over to the stove. Over on the stove, I have my fryer heated up to 350 degrees F. Then we're adding in our tofu, about 7 or 8 pieces at a time, being very careful not to overload the wok. Remember that our batter here today is fairly wet, which means that it's going to rapidly drop the temperature of your fryer as things enter the wok, so be mindful of your fryer temperature as you proceed here. I'm giving these a solid 5 minutes in the fryer until golden brown, then removing, reheating, and repeating with my remaining tofu. Then next, we're removing our fryer oil, cleaning out our wok, heating as hot as possible, adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, and as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Then going in here first are my aromatic veggies. Here's our garlic and ginger going in for about 15 seconds until nice and fragrant. Then next up are my carrots and baby bok choy, which we're giving a quick 2-minute toss to on heat, before following up with my shiitake mushrooms, braising sauce, mushroom water, and of course our fried tofu. I'm tossing this all to combine, then letting this all simmer for about 10 minutes until our tofu is nice and tender, and our liquids have reduced by about half. Then finally, I'm adding in my cornstarch slurry here to thicken things up, giving one more toss to combine, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so for those following along, this is now actually the 3rd version of this dish that we have done in this series. A little while back, we also did a shallow fried version, which is fairly similar with the exception that if you are terrified of deep frying, I know that I was for quite some time, shallow frying is a great intermediary step that's not nearly as scary or death-defying. For the daring though, the deep fry to our tofu causes the batter to puff up in the fry, while the light egg white and cornstarch composition also helps to keep the tofu super thin and delicate for a soft, toothsome, and gently chewy bite. Our shiitake, carrots, and bok choy are all also great choices for long braises like this one, because their dense qualities are able to withstand the braise nicely. Then our oyster sauce base is also rich with deep umami qualities without being overly salty, with a nice extra kick of umami coming from that reserved mushroom water, which I think is also the real secret ingredient today. You remembered to save this, right? Finally, the last thing that I'll reiterate is that I personally love Chinese stir-fries like this one, where the dish is not necessarily intentionally vegetarian, but simply built around the use of tofu as a protein element. We're not bending over backwards today to adjust our recipe to suit the use of tofu here, because the dish itself, from its fry method to the braise and its vegetable pairing, is entirely intended for tofu. It's in the name after all. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to actually decent tasting vegetarian recipes, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Wu Can Cook fried rice pop-up is back at Oakland First Friday tonight, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon. Bye.